The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, he'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Welcome back to Rushcliffe again, everybody, where the rain is still falling. To be fair though, water plays a key role in this village's makeup because there's a rather large watery feature that acts as something of a tourist attraction. Let's go and see it. This is the village and the parish of Hickling. Hickling, Hickle's people. There are a few villages along the Grantham Canal that are more impressive than Hickling. Here we are in that village, located close to the border with Leicestershire, approximately 8 miles northwest of Melton Mowbray on the edge of the Vale of Belvoir. Now disused, the Grantham Canal passes through the village and Hickling has a large basin adjacent to the main road through the settlement. This would have facilitated loading and mooring when the canal was in use. The basin now attracts a substantial population of swans and ducks, as well as a lot of human tourists. Plans to put the canal back to water include the building of a swing bridge on the main road through the village. Like many bridges along the canal, the original one has been flattened and therefore presently prevents navigation of the cut. Much of the village lies within a conservation area which contains 24 listed buildings. Among those is St Luke's Church, which dates from the 14th century. Inside the church are 2 ornate grave lids that were made for persons of importance and date from the 10th century. Roman coins and medals were found in an urn nearby in 1771. It's suspected there may have been a Roman base close to Hickling. Hickling's also associated with politics. The American politician Fred M. Warner, the former state governor of Michigan, was born in Hickling, and the former Rushcliffe MP, Ruth Edwards, resides near the village too. So, there's a lot to see here, and it was still raining unfortunately, but let's get into it anyway. Our main walk starts at Hickling Basin on the Grantham Canal. The basin was built between 1793 and 1797 and was once a hive of industrial activity. The basin's size is a nod to the area's former prosperity. In the canal's working days, this was a wharf where narrowboats and barges were loaded and unloaded before making their way to the Trent with their cargo. There were 2 wharves here in fact. The second one was attached to the former Navigation Inn. The basin still has its original warehouse, a listed building constructed in 1797 with its distinctive lopsided sloping roof. It also has an aqueduct which crosses a small tributary of the River Smite. Hickling Basin was the only turning point along all 33 miles of the Grantham Canal. Legend has it the canal had a whale. Children were told the creature swam the canal at night and came to Hickling to turn around, in the only space which was large enough. The commercial use of the canal declined in the mid-1800s with the coming of the railways. By the early 1920s, the canal's working life was over. However, Hickling Basin is still the village's focal point. The warehouse was built to store grains and coal, but step inside these days and you won't find any of that. What you will find is the old Wharf Tearooms, a cafe that serves locally sourced food and drinks. It opened in 2017 and the restoration was funded by a £400,000 derelict land grant dating from 1993. As for the Navigation Inn, that became Bridge House. It was built in 1804 and closed for business in 1912. In 1920 it was converted into a house which was then named Bridge View. It formed a second wharf where boats moored up for the night and accommodation for the boatmen was provided. The Navigation Inn would also have extensive stabling for the horses, which drew the barges. Nowadays, the Plough is the only remaining pub. It predates the canal, recorded as it was on the 1776 enclosure map. Records of its landlords go back to 1822, and the first listed is George Hives. The Plough Inn remains to this day a place where many families in the village have celebrated special occasions, including weddings, birthdays, and reunions.
Now obviously
on a day like today when it's absolutely bucketing it down with rain, there's not many people here. You'd expect that, wouldn't you? But in the summertime, when the sun does eventually show its face, Hickling Basin becomes a tourist magnet in this part of Rushcliffe, and it's absolutely heaving, and rightly so, quite frankly. So let's move on down the road towards the church, because that's next. To the church next, and this is dedicated to St Luke. It was originally dedicated to St Wilfrid, but was rededicated during the Reformation in the 1530s. The present building dates from the first half of the 14th century, but there's been a church on this site for over 900 years. The church contains many notable features, including a 10th century Anglo-Saxon coffin lid that's considered one of the most valuable pre-Norman works of its kind in England. There's also a 14th century cross slab built into the west wall of the south aisle. The chancel was pulled down and rebuilt in Victorian Gothic style in 1843, with a few pieces of the original glass included in the current east window. In 1840, the organ was installed. In 1887, a gale blew the lead off the roof, an event which led to the rector, Francis Ashmole, to describe the roof some 20 years later as like a moth-eaten umbrella. It has since been repaired. Now, if you come to Hickling Basin and you feel like you want to have a walk around the village after you've sampled the Tearooms in the old Wharf, why not walk down to Walker's Green, which is this little park right in the centre of Hickling on the corner of Bridegate Lane. And also on this corner, there's an old Methodist chapel. Let's cover that next. Hickling's Wesleyan Methodist Chapel was opened in 1848. It measured 37 feet by 29 and cost just over £244 to build. It reused materials from a previous chapel which could well have been located on the same site. By 1873, the chapel provided seating for 200 persons. This had fallen to 155 in 1911 after a conversion from forms to pews. After some extensions, in 1940, the chapel was reported to measure 42 feet by 26.5. There was also a schoolroom and 2 vestries, or classrooms. So to be honest with you, Hickling is a very easy village to walk around. It's basically one long street, but there are a couple of side streets that come off to the left and the right, but they're sort of few and far between. And the landmarks, generally speaking, are all on this main road. There's another one behind us here. That building there is the Old Forge. And there's one opposite that along one of those side streets, but I can't walk down it because it's gated. It's more of a drive than a street. That belongs to the Manor House. Now, the history of Hickling's Manor House is not very well known, but there is a little bit that I found, so let's talk about it. Not a lot is known about the Manor House. It isn't mentioned in the Protestation Returns of 1642. However, take that information with a pinch of salt, because in that sort of record, locations are only given to avoid confusion between branches of the same family. It seems the Marshall family were placed at the manor in the mid to late 1800s. In the 1871 census, their household is located at Hall Yard House. The memoirs of John Howard Marshall were published in 1970, and whilst they are completely focused on his life with horses, they do include details about the family and some wonderful descriptions of individuals and places in Hickling during his childhood. He was born in 1889, grew up in the manor, and his family sold the estate in 1915. Several anecdotes build a colourful picture of its parents and the household, including descriptions of the inside of the house. Long sections of the book record agricultural shows, point-to-points and hunting in the area. His writing reveals a deep love of Hickling and the surrounding countryside, and a genuine sense of loss when the family connection with the village was lost. The last landmark on the walk is the village hall, which was originally Hickling's primary school. It closed in 1966 at a time of great change in primary school education all over the country. Smaller village schools were being joined together, and the pupils from Hickling moved to the newly extended Kinnelton Primary School instead. Now a communal venue, it's long been the centre of village events. As a school, it opened in 1838 and was expanded in 1877 when there were 78 pupils. The building remained in the ownership of the church and was used as a church hall for a short period after the school's closure. In 1973, plans to turn the building into a village hall began, and the building, after some years of leasing from the church, came under full community ownership in 1985 at a cost of £12,000. In 1982, Hickling Village Hall became the first of its kind to obtain a full 7-day licence to sell alcohol. The first licensees were Judy Burkitt and Jeff Clayton. There are a number of war memorials in the village, and mostly they relate to World War I. They were originally sited outside the school, in the Wesleyan Chapel, and in St Luke's Church. The one on the wall of the old school was unveiled in April 1921, and it specifically relates to those who had died and had also been to this school. It should be noted that Gwen Kane was a great supporter of the village hall and its activities from its earliest days. With the fondest memories and as a tribute to her and her wonderful work, a bench was installed in a newly landscaped area in front of the hall in August 2020. Now, that information board tells you a few things about Hickling Village, and one of the things it mentions is that house over there. You can see with the 3 windows and the arched doorway. That is called Cobblestones, and that used to be called Cromwell House. It was, let me just check, a bakery, a shop and a post office that was run by the Harriman family. Apparently, it's now a house. And we're pretty much done with Hickling at this point, because beyond Cobblestones, there's a few other houses and whatnot, but that's effectively the end of civilization, so it's time to move on to the next one. To finish with, we're heading for Hickling pastures. Between the village and that is the cricket ground, off this road, Bridegate Lane. Hickling Cricket Club was founded in 1864, and they're currently members of the Nottinghamshire Cricket League and the Beaver Evening League. Hickling used to play on a field behind the church in the main village. Even today, the locals still refer to that old ground as the cricket field. Bridegate Lane has been their home for a while now. One notable member of the Hickling cricket team was Fred Collishaw, who was born in Hickling in 1860. Fred's father and brother were carpenters and joiners, and the family moved to Birmingham when he was a teenager. Fred went on to become a professional cricketer for Warwickshire and was the first man ever to score a century at Edgbaston. For a spell at least, Hickling Cricket Club played a special match which pitted the club's married members against the singletons. This was done to open each season. As well as these matches, men versus women matches were played. The men were handicapped, right-handed players played left-handed, and vice versa. They could only catch with one hand too. Now, Hickling Pastures is a scattered settlement laid out in pretty much the same style as those piecemeal areas of Hewellsfield Common, which we saw a few weeks ago. Within all these isolated houses, farm buildings and cottages is the Sarmarpan Yog Meditation Centre and Retreat just off the A606. Sarmarpan meditation isn't a complex thing to understand. Sarmarpan meditation is based on the principle of inner experience. It's a gateway to personal transformation, peace, happiness and satisfaction in life. The practice has been handed down over the course of 800 years from teacher to pupil, originating in the Himalayas. The meditation causes a spiritual energy called the Kundalini, which lies dormant inside each of us, apparently. This inner wisdom results in positive changes such as less stress and tension, more energy and motivation, and a more positive outlook on life. That's another one down in Rushcliffe, and we're hurtling towards that finish line now. We've got one left in this central section before we start heading back north again. It's one that touches the Leicestershire border and has some bits of history with a famous cricketer. A household name, in fact. See you tomorrow. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.